What's going on, guys? Master Coach and Education Director Aaron Guyette here on the Living.Fit Show, and I have the one, the only Ebenezer Samuel. So this guy is a phenom. We were just talking earlier before we hopped on. He is really incredible at picking stuff up and putting stuff down, but I think he sells himself a bit short. I've seen all of the stuff that he's doing with men's health. I see all of the stuff that he's doing on social media. Clearly he's better at better than just picking stuff up and putting stuff down. He definitely has a vision for what to capture, how to capture it, and who to present it to and how to present it, so that other people can now know how to pick up heavy stuff and put stuff down. So Ebenezer, what's up, man?
Yeah, you're right. I do sell it short. I can pick things up and put them down really fast and really slowly and in multiple planes, just like all of us about.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%. Yeah. Nice. So speaking of that, obviously you know a bit about fitness. What got you into fitness?
So it's interesting. I think I kind of think that fitness was just always something that, like, it's the closest thing, if you really think about it, to being a superhero, right? And I'm obsessed with superheroes. Like, I'm first in line for every Marvel movie. I think I've watched, like, I used to read the comic books, like huge Marvel DC. Superman was like I had Superman everything, like sheets, pajamas, underwear when I was growing up. And if like, there are a couple ways you can kind of, I think I always wanted to kind of look the part,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And kind of move the part. And the only way you can really get there is with some, either it's like some level of real life fitness, like, you're working construction, or, you're in the military, or, or you're an athlete, right? Or if you're incapable of being a pro athlete because you're actually 5'9" and you're not growing anymore, then it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of like explore and try to kind of figure out training, right? And so I was a kind of like a much smaller kid growing up. I was one of those kids who, like, probably senior year of high school, I don't think I could do like more than 5 push-ups. So it's kind of like, how do I get to that point? How do I figure that stuff out? And I was always really intrigued with the idea that you can kind of learn to, or you can teach your body, you can train yourself to get better at something, right? And so that's kind of, I think, why I kind of adopted fitness, or tried to fall into a lot of incorrect regimens when I was younger, when I was, 21, 22, in college. I tried to, read everything that was in the magazines, got into bodybuilding, going to all the bodybuilding gyms, listening to what the old guy with the giant biceps says. That's why I kind of got into it. And then over time, I kind of, started to learn a lot more about, explosive training, speed training, multi-planar training. I was like, there's so much here, mobility. There's so much more here than really just picking things up and putting things down and doing a lot of biceps curls. And it was always kind of this background thing in my life. I actually, not to tell the story too long, but I actually started out in, I thought it was so far from, I thought I kind of knew, like, by the time I was like 16, 17, right? I knew I'm going to be one of those people who they're going to spend like an hour and a half in the gym every day, because that's kind of, it's the regimen. It's regular. It makes me feel good. It gets my body in the place that it needs. And I think we can all intuit a little bit more about our fitness than we want to. Like, we can tell when a push-up is really, really easy, but we don't feel it in our chest. And that's probably because we were doing the worm instead of doing a push-up, right? And we know that, and we just sort of ignore it. And I was always kind of into, noting that stuff, paying attention to that stuff from 16, 17, 18. I'm going to train my whole life. But I went into magazine journalism instead, and actually spent a couple of years writing I interned at ESPN, the magazine, studied magazine journalism, wound up writing for the New York Daily News, because, again, this whole superhero thing, I was like, I'm never going to get to be super fit. I don't think I can do that. I'm just going to wind up being somebody who trains all the time. I'm going to do the best I can. Um, but I'm the regular guy, right?
Yeah.
So what's the best way I can learn? Who are the best guys I can learn from to like figure out how to do those awesome superheroic things, right?
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was, Odell Beckham, Victor Cruz, um, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. Um, those guys do these amazing these superheroic feats of athleticism, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, if I can cover them, if I can write about them, then in between writing about them, I can pick their brains about how they get in the shape they are, and maybe I'll kind of figure it out along the way, right? So I wound up doing that for probably like 5 or 6 years or something. Um, learned a lot about the fact that by and large, um, athletes kind of don't necessarily know how their fitness, exactly how their fitness is coming together. There's a great trainer behind this athlete, and the athlete has like the athleticism, right? And has the natural ability, but there's somebody who's kind of helping them program what they're doing in the off season and program what they're doing in season in general. I mean, there are some exceptions, but that's generally how it is. Um, and then eventually an opportunity kind of opened up at Men's Health. I jumped at it and kind of, it's like, I can actually do this too, and I'm not as far off as I think I am.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So, you talked about looking the part and being able to move the part. Do you feel like, or has there been a time where you felt it sort of being like internalizing the part too? So changing like your mindset, changing your confidence, changing so it's more superhero like and less average citizen like, or even lesser than. Some people may think they're lesser than or something like that, and then they start looking the part or moving the part, and now it changes the way they see themselves, or they understand, and think about themselves.
It's interesting because I try to. I actually think a lot about kind of kid me and kind of like high school me, and I think he's kind of always in the back of my mind. So also like I'm obviously not white, right? I'm this kind of skinny kid. My mom is Chinese, my dad's Indian, and we moved around a lot. Grade school, high school. I also have kind of a weird name that's really, really annoying, especially around Christmas time. So I got a lot of that, but I kind of think about, I almost like to have not think of myself as any different, right? Than I was, because I think the reality is my proportions for training are a little bit weird. I have really, really long femurs. That means that squatting is hard. Putting on mass on my legs is not going to be something that comes naturally, right? I have a short torso, and to go with those long legs, so maneuvers like L-sits, some of those gymnastics ideas, I have really long levers that my abs have to lift. So that's like a lot of work, right? So I think, in terms of like natural gifts for this, I try to keep those little things in mind. And the thing that I can do, or the thing I've always kind of perceived, and again, this is like when I'm in high school in the gym, during lunchtime, everybody's kind of like sitting around. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in and do way too many biceps curls and not get enough out of them because I don't understand what I'm doing, but I can outwork everyone, right? And I think inherent in, or kind of built into that I can outwork everyone mentality, and that's what I believe is my greatest strength, or that's what I'm going to perceive as my greatest strength, is this idea that I have to keep doing that, and I don't think I can keep doing that the moment I think like I've reached some level. So I kind of refuse to believe or refuse to think about or dwell on the fact that I've reached some level. I think it's really, really important for me to perceive myself, especially when I'm training, as that like 18-year-old who's not in shape and still kind of figuring it out. And I also think too, in a weird way, that kind of helps me with kind of clients and the people who are, I do, obviously I'm doing a lot of programming for men's health,
Yeah.
right? And for that men's health audience. And those guys don't necessarily need 17 Superman push-ups in a row. Can I do that? Yes. But I kind of need to, I grew up reading Men's Health, Muscle and Fitness. And it's interesting because I would do the workouts straight from the magazine, right? And again, it's hard because magazines, at the time, fitness was very different. And it's just hard with magazines because also not every workout is going to tailor to every person. But I would do the exact workouts, and on the cover it said biceps in 30 days, bigger biceps in 30 days. I'd be like, so why aren't my biceps any bigger, right? So I try to keep all of that in mind because I think there's some 18-year-old kid out there who's reading Men's Health, or paying attention to our Instagram because that's where things are. So I want to make things as realistic as possible for that person, and because I think I am the target audience, and I think I need to remember that even if I don't look like the target audience right now, I need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's so crucial, and it's cool that you can look and think about yourself in the lens of that high schooler, right? That you're saying, but as well, also, the person now, hey, you got longer levers, and by the way, you just totally stated exactly how my build is too. Really long arms, super short torso, really long legs. Man, all of this pushing, pulling, squatting, and lunging stuff is difficult. But I would, now it's I wouldn't have it any other way. It's it's a great fighting and grappling body. It's paid off in huge dividends because now I'm almost 40 years old, and I can still do the combat stuff better than the 20-year-old kid that's doing the combat stuff for the Marine Corps. So obviously there's benefits to that as well, but there are drawbacks, especially when you're in the gym and you're like, man, you make that squat look a million times easier than when I do it. I think that's so important. And the cool part is I want to cue in on and hone in on this idea that you realize that you can, maybe you're not going to be the Kobe, right? But you can be the person that is training the Kobe, right? You could be the person that's helping that person become the superhero or the phenom. And you can even do those things to become, kind of that superhero like persona and mover and then aesthetically right looking person. So that's huge. So I know we were talking a little bit earlier because you mentioned the bicep stuff. So being that person that can generate this superhero like content, the superhero like training, you talked about biceps. I know you have an ab thing. Can you kind of walk us through sort of the ab workouts, the ab exercises, and kind of your approach to how you program, how you write that so that people can really understand, really embrace, and then be able to use it and then see the result from that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So again, you think about superheroes and action figures, and it's also interesting too, because if I told all these stories 10 years ago, 15 years ago, superheroes weren't cool. Now, now everything about superheroes is great.
Yeah, they're like nerd. Now it's oh, this is amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're the cool kids now.
Exactly.
But
right.
yeah, I think when you think about superheroes, the first thing you think about, or the first thing I thought about, my mom bought me all the action figures, and I think she bought them as much for her as she did for me because now that they're all pristinely preserved in these tins at home. I get to go home tomorrow, and she's going to show them to me and remind me of them and all this stuff. But you kind of saw, again, big arms, big chest, mirror muscles, right? Six pack abs, right? And so again, you think about this 18-year-old kid, 17, 16, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid. And my whole thing is I'm going to outwork and I'm going to outstudy everybody to get in shape, right? And there's also a lot of talk at the time, that, you might, I feel like genetic conversations were really big when I was coming up in like high school and college. It's like, oh, you just might not have the genetics for it, right? I feel like the whole discussion of fitness was very different about 2 decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think so. The one thing I can have, right, and to some extent, I always kind of had, right, was like a strong core and 6-pack abs, and I didn't have quite that, but that's like, okay. And you also read in magazines, right? I would read, I think like ESPN, the magazine at the time, um, and there would be there are all these stories about this guy does 1,000 crunches, this guy does 1,000 sit-ups, right? So I came up doing my first workouts ever were sitting in my basement, 16, 17 years old, and I can't do a push-up. I don't really understand the squat. I have no weights, right? But I can do these sit-ups, and this is going to get me that 6-pack. And so all I did was like, I literally did like thousands and thousands of sit-ups. But then this weird thing happened because the 6-pack didn't really come, right? Because there's all these other components.
But you had massively strong hip flexors.
Actually, what's funny is I had what I had was so I was doing these on kind of like this really weird like carpet cementy surface, right? And my dad was like, and I was, again, it's like I don't really understand like eccentric or anything like that. So my back was slamming into the ground after every single rep. So what I had after a couple of months was all these like random like marks on my back. Okay. And my parents were like, yeah, whatever you're doing, it's not working. But yeah, so, but either way, it wasn't getting it done. But I was always fast. Like any guy who was at like all the, there are all those like websites, but it's like there's that one like superhero jacked or something like that. I would read, any magazine that had like a guy who was playing a superhero on it, like Ryan Reynolds is playing Deadpool. Okay, what's his workout, right? Yeah. And again, it's like a snapshot of what they're doing. It is not, nearly accurate, but I would study that and study gymnasts, right? Because I was always really fascinated by what gymnasts. I had taken gymnastics when I was like, my parents put me in gymnastics when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, and that was awful. Couldn't do a handstand, couldn't do anything. But I was always fascinated by like the idea of the hollow hold, right? Because it's this weird kind of move, and all you do is you lift your legs and you lift your shoulder blades off the ground, and somehow it does this. It leaves you really sore in your abs when you're done, right? Or at least it did for me. And I was fascinated by that and the L-sit, and so I spent a lot of time kind of studying just ab training over the years. And learning it from different people. Again, I'm going to these stories. I'm covering NFL stuff, so it's like, hey, Victor Cruz, like, what's your ab workout? What do I do for that? And what I gradually learned is it's not about the sit-ups at all. Like spinal flexion, hip flexion is like one element of what my abs are capable of. And I also learned this other thing too, because one other thing that was happening is I was doing all these sit-ups, right? And these sit-up like motions, because that's what we grow up on. And I was starting to like my abs were getting very strong, and they were legitimately strong, but none of the other supporting musculature was strong. So like visually, it wasn't doing, it wasn't getting the job done, right? It wasn't creating the look I wanted. And I do. A side note is I think aesthetics get kind of like a bad rap these days, but there's a balance, and there's something that like a visually and aesthetically, and a physique that works aesthetically is probably to some extent, and this is not blanket by any means, but if you do it right, it's gonna be functionally not too bad either.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Well, and sometimes you just want to look good, right? Like that, there's nothing wrong with
that. Exactly.
You can have your cake and eat it too in this world.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think, but what I gradually discovered is that my core is supposed to work together. And so I started thinking of abs as not just abs, but core. So lower back muscle, lower back spinal extensors, glutes come into play because that's how I'm pushing my pelvis into the correct position, getting my hips in the correct position to support my spine, abdominals, obliques, to some extent lats, and all of these muscle groups work together, right? And again, came up in bodybuilding, so I think in muscle groups, right? But all of these muscle groups work together, and so what I started doing was trying to train my core. Even if I was doing, say, an ab specific exercise, it's like that needs to be complemented by some glute specific work to kind of drive my hip to balance out the hip flexion and spinal flexion. I need to get a little bit of hip extension in there, and I need some lower back work too. I need some rotation in there. Started to kind of understand and explore those ideas, and then I kind of gradually, like I'd say probably over like the last like 4 or 5 years, I've started to kind of marry different core ideas and core movements and again, I don't think I'm doing anything new. I like to say that every exercise, like all the good exercises are taken. So anything anybody makes up, it's like, sorry, it's not going to be as good as a push-up. Keep trying.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm doing anything different. I just think I'm trying to think of it functionally. And with the program we created, I'm trying to think of it like in a very well-rounded way. And the program that we created on All Out Studio with Men's Health, Epic Abs, kind of does that. It's going to get you to think about your core, not you, because I'm sure you do already, but it's going to get you to think about core and not just abs. And it's going to get you to think about more movements and more movement capability and explore what your core is capable of, instead of just create like this. You're going to get the aesthetics you want, but you're also going to discover like all the things your core is capable of: rotation, anti-rotation. I divided into rotation, anti-rotation, anti-extension, spinal flexion, and general bracing, right? Yeah. And I try to teach you how to like execute and work with those 5 categories. And then I teach you how those categories then play into other movements. Like if I can properly brace my core, it's going to make me much, much better at the bench press, and it's going to help me transfer my lower body power up to drive up through my chest. And we do some of that. I'm huge into anti-rotation. So it's kind of, I think it's a really well-rounded way to kind of learn your core. And the workouts are like, it was fun doing it, but I never want to do with the way we film all the workouts in one day, and I never want to do all 5 of those workouts.
That's right. So I have a saying that I'll say at every course I teach or whatever, and it's and I'm just restating it, rephrasing it from somebody else somewhere else, and I don't even know who originated this, but we don't fire cannons from canoes. And if we think about our core, like oftentimes we treat our core like a canoe and we don't really work on it, like you're saying. And to be able to get a program like, the Epic Abs, it's like, okay, now you can actually fire cannons, whether it's push, pull, or even your leg work, right? You can fire from either a greater ship or from the ground, right? Because you're able to brace through your core in a way that can transfer load powerfully. I love that. I think that's awesome. And so talk to me a little bit about, so now we'll jump into a completely kind of different line, but talk to me a little bit about some of the work that you've done with Marcus, our very own Marcus Martinez. But did that work start pre his time with Living.Fit, or did it start around that same time when he started with Living.Fit? And then kind of what has transpired from that relationship?
It's interesting. I cannot remember when I met Marcus. I want to say maybe 2-3 years ago. We've been kind of working on and off. He's somebody who I really admire, his skills with kettlebells. They're obviously, that's kind of his thing.
Yeah, right.
But kind of, he was definitely one of the like, I feel like what 2-3 years ago, right, is when you started seeing, and I may, again, my timeline may be off, but I want to say that was around like when you started, like flows had been around, but they were kind of having a moment,
Yeah.
right? So we do, we've worked a lot with Eric Leha down at On It. But Marcus is just, I feel like he's different, really unique. I wanted to kind of get him in at Men's Health. He also has a very unique background. I feel like, I haven't, I'm very big into kind of ideas of diversity, right? One of the things I didn't have coming up in fitness, right, is all the magazines. And again, it's not a knock on anybody because it was a different time, and I think people are always, they mean well, right? But I didn't see a lot of like trainers who kind of looked like me. And so, like growing up in Pennsylvania, I actually have an accounting degree, which is my deep dark secret, right? Because before I went to college for all this journalism stuff, right? It was kind of like, my parents are like, "What are you going to do?" Well, your SAT scores rock, right? So you're going to be an accountant. And I was like, okay, because I hadn't really thought through my life, and I definitely hadn't considered. Again, I was going to the gym this whole time, and like I said, listening to the old guy who said do a bunch of biceps curls. But I didn't see being a fitness trainer or anything like that as a possibility, right? Yeah. So I've thought about that a lot over the last couple of years. And Marcus has a Cuban background. I try to reach out to different people and keep them involved with men's health, because I think that's really, really important for us to kind of show people that one, like everybody can be fit. And also that two, like aspiring trainers, like everybody has that ceiling, regardless of what your background is or where you may come from. So Marcus does, he's one of our anchor trainers we still do Instagram live workouts. We started doing them last year. And he's been one of our anchor trainers there. Super reliable and kind of does a really good job of teaching kettlebell fundamentals, it's like, I think the amount of times I've seen a kettlebell swing done incorrectly.
Endless.
Yes, the squat to front raise is not what it is. But I think he does a really impressive job of teaching the fundamentals. And then he's also become a very big part of a project that's super close to my heart, which is our Strength and Diversity program. And basically, we started it last year in 2020, and we take 6 to 8 kind of young trainers, trainers who are kind of still figuring it out. To be honest, age really isn't a big thing, from marginalized communities, right? Because again, it's like, who hasn't had a chance to like really understand their potential and really understand how the industry works. If I would have known when I was 22 that, or even like 10 years ago or whatever, if I would have known like that, like a CSCS, right, that's what I have to work for, right, in order to get somewhere, that, and I think that would have helped a lot, right? I wasn't sure, and if I would have known too that one way to get into train, you can train an MBA team, right? Or you can run men's health fitness. That these are options for kind of a fitness career. I think my arc might have been slightly different. And so we're trying to give marginalized trainers a little bit of a jump start, because I don't think they always realize the possibilities or their potential, because they don't see it. So he's been a huge part with that. He's one of our mentors in there, and does a great job of just kind of showing young trainers, and showing trainers who are just trying to figure it out, kind of showing them the ropes a little bit. He's got so much experience on that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you talked a little bit about, flow having its day, because I absolutely think now, like, that is a thing. It's you're seeing it. It's much more commonplace, where, like you said, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, it was a completely different world, and fitness is really relatively young, right? Like, the fitness industry is relatively young. So there is so much potential, and to be able to know that and to reach, every community, to include, and especially marginalized communities or communities where maybe that wouldn't have reached them. Now they can understand, hey, look, there is a ton of opportunity on the horizon here. And here's just a snippet of a couple of different, incredible things that you could walk out, in the fitness industry. That's pretty rad. So this is a question that we ask every, single person that comes on the Living Fit show. And it's, what is Living Fit to you? And obviously not Living Fit the brand, but this idea of Living Fit. And now I can confidently say we have had a completely wide array, huge spectrum of answers. There's probably at this point no wrong answers, but it is super intriguing and really interesting to hear, each guest's kind of approach and thought on, Living Fit. So Ebenezer, what is Living Fit to you?
It's interesting because, first of all, the brand is awesome too. So shout out to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's interesting because I think it's definitely evolved for me. I think if you would have asked that 17, 18-year-old me, right, he would have said Living Fit is basically like looking like a superhero, right? Looking and performing like a superhero, full stop, right? And I still believe like that is my personal aspiration is to continue to work towards looking and performing like a superhero. But I have a more nuanced understanding of what that means, right? In that before, to me, looking and performing like a superhero amounted to, I want to bench press a whole lot of weight, right? And I want to look the part, so I want those abs, right? And that was it. And now I think I kind of understand, partly because I also thought that those workouts, that just the whole concept of going to the gym, as long as I went in and I bench pressed or curled or whatever, all of a sudden somehow like a curl like makes me more explosive so I can dunk a basketball, right? I thought all that could happen. I thought that's how fitness worked.
Yeah.
Now I kind of understand, those workouts have to occur in multiple ways. Like, I need some sprint workouts in there. I need some change of direction work. I need a whole lot of kettlebell swings in my life if I really want to ever broad jump or vertical jump anywhere. So it's more, and I need a ton of ankle mobility, so I have to like live kind of that well-rounded, ultra holistic fitness experience. That's for me personally.
Yeah.
But I think Living Fit, and I think the term is interesting. So my dad is he turned 77 this year. He's also, I have never played catch with my dad ever. And the reason is because if you guys ever see him, so he's Indian. He was born in like 40 something, whatever makes him 77, 44,
Yeah.
right? And he was born with polio. He was born in Malaysia, and that was all right before the vaccine for polio was like available in Malaysia. So he never got it, right?
Yeah.
And so his whole life, he's kind of he's never walked, right? He's always needed braces. If he doesn't have his braces on, ever since I've known him, his knees like bend backwards like a flamingo, which is both painful and not how our anatomy is meant to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is like, so as he's gotten older, me and my brother do everything we can. And he's super self-reliant, right? Like he doesn't, he uses crutches or like a walker or cane. He has my whole life, but he's always been self-reliant, and he's always, there are times like I'm strong enough that, I can just pick my dad up and we're going to carry you up the stairs. Right. But he does it himself. And he's always done it himself. And he's always kind of, guided us, right? And like he took me to school like every day of my life. There was a point where there was a point in high school where like I had to go to high school really far away, and he would wake up at like 5 a.m., take me to school, and then, or yeah, take me to school and then pick me up later in the day. And in between, he's working like 3 jobs, right? So to me, like he's kind of like the epitome of living fit a little bit, because it's like almost like a perseverance and a desire to move,
Yeah.
right? Because he could easily say, okay, I'm just going to sit in the wheelchair, and that's, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But he takes a walk. He lives in Pennsylvania, so he goes to a Dick's Sporting Goods these days, and he'll put on his mask and he'll walk for an hour, right? And that's his cardio, because he's old now and he's retired and he doesn't need to do anything. But to me, the concept of living fit, I think, is that you have this burning desire to move, and it's not going to be the same for all of us. Like my version of movement is always going to involve like bench presses and Superman push-ups and as many superheroic things as I can get in,
Yeah.
right? But his version of movement, it's like this desire to move and to continue to find ways to make sure that you can move. I think that is what it is to live fit.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, for his ability to be self-reliant, right? When he could, like you said, nothing wrong with it, easily just, no, I'm going to sit in a wheelchair. And that's incredible. I mean, that's just as heroic to me as being able to do 17 superhero push-ups, right? That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Well, Ebenezer, thank you so much. I know that you will be coming out with even way more programs than just the epic abs that you have through Men's Health. I know that people can find you on Flexit. Is that correct? As well as obviously Instagram and the social media that exists. And of course that will all be out with the show. We will showcase you and direct people to you so that they can get in those superhero workouts and not only look the part, but move the part and then be the part of the superhero. So thank you so much for being on the Living Fit Show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.